Marcus Williams had been working as a security guard at the federal courthouse for 12 years. He knew every corner of the building, every judge's routine, and every lawyer's habit. But nothing could have prepared him for what he discovered on that rainy Tuesday morning in March. The courthouse buzzed with activity as usual. Lawyers rushed through metal detectors, their expensive briefcases clicking against the marble floors. Marcus watched from his position near the main entrance, his trained eyes scanning for anything unusual. He had developed a sixth sense for trouble over the years, and today something felt different. Around 10:30, a black SUV pulled up to the courthouse steps. Marcus recognized the vehicle immediately. It belonged to Vice President Kamala Harris's legal team. 3 people stepped out. Sarah Chen, the lead attorney, followed by 2 junior lawyers carrying thick folders. Marcus had seen them before, during high-profile cases, but never this early in the morning. What caught his attention wasn't their arrival, but their behavior. Sarah Chen kept looking over her shoulder as they climbed the steps. The younger lawyers whispered urgently to each other, clutching their folders like precious cargo. Marcus made a mental note but didn't think much of it at first. The real surprise came when they didn't head to the usual courtrooms. Instead, they took the elevator to the 3rd floor, a restricted area where only certain personnel had access. Marcus frowned. He knew the building's layout better than anyone, and there were no scheduled hearings on the 3rd floor that day. His curiosity got the better of him. During his lunch break, Marcus decided to take a walk past the 3rd floor offices. The hallway was eerily quiet, but he could hear muffled voices coming from conference room 312. He recognized Sarah Chen's voice immediately, sharp and authoritative as always. As he passed the door, Marcus heard something that made him stop, in his tracks. Sarah was talking about documents that needed to be handled carefully and mentioned something about keeping certain information from becoming public. Her tone was different from her usual professional demeanor. There was urgency, almost panic in her voice. Marcus pretended to check his phone while listening. Another voice, one he didn't recognize, mentioned the vice president's involvement and potential damage control. The conversation was fragmented, but certain phrases stood out: sealed records, backdated documents, and need to act fast. His heart raced. In his 12 years of courthouse security, Marcus had never stumbled upon anything this significant. He knew he was hearing something he probably shouldn't, but he couldn't walk away. His instincts told him this was important, possibly very important. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. When it ended, Marcus quickly moved to a nearby stairwell and watched as the legal team emerged. Sarah Chen looked stressed, constantly checking her phone. The junior lawyers appeared nervous, whispering as they waited for the elevator. As they left the building, Marcus noticed Sarah Chen hand a sealed envelope to a man in a gray suit who had been waiting by the SUV. The exchange was quick, almost secretive. The man immediately walked to a different car and drove away in the opposite direction. That evening, Marcus couldn't shake what he had witnessed. He sat in his small apartment, replaying the day's events in his mind. He had always been a by-the-book kind of person, someone who followed rules and minded his own business. But something about today felt different. The urgency in their voices, the secretive meeting location, the mysterious envelope exchange. It all pointed to something bigger than a routine legal matter. Marcus had heard rumors over the years about powerful people using their influence to manipulate legal proceedings. He had always dismissed such talk as conspiracy theories. But now, having witnessed something firsthand, he began to wonder if there was more truth to those rumors than he had ever imagined. He decided to keep his eyes and ears open. If this was just a routine legal matter, then no harm would come from being observant. But if it was something more serious, something that the public had a right to know about, then Marcus felt he might have a responsibility to pay attention. Little did he know that this decision would change his life forever. What started as simple curiosity about unusual behavior in his workplace would soon uncover a web of secrets that reached the highest levels of government. Marcus Williams, a humble security guard who had always stayed in the background, was about to become the key witness to one of the most significant political scandals of the decade. As he prepared for bed that night, Marcus made a promise to himself. He would document everything he observed. If this turned out to be nothing, he could simply forget about it. But if it was something important, he wanted to be ready. He had no idea that within weeks, his careful observations would expose a truth that powerful people had worked very hard to keep hidden. The following week brought more unusual activity. Marcus had started carrying a small notebook, discreetly jotting down times, dates, and observations. He told himself it was probably unnecessary, but something deep inside urged him to keep records. On Thursday morning, the same black SUV returned, but this time with different passengers. Sarah Chen was there again, but she was accompanied by two men Marcus had never seen before. They wore expensive suits and carried themselves with the confidence of people who were used to getting their way. One was tall with silver hair, the other shorter with thick glasses and a briefcase that looked like it could hold state secrets. What made this visit even more interesting was the timing. They arrived at 7 in the morning, a full hour before the courthouse officially opened to the public. Marcus watched from the security office as they were let in through a side entrance by someone he recognized as Deputy Administrator Janet Morrison, a woman who rarely dealt with routine courthouse business. This time, Marcus was ready. He had studied the building's camera system during his off hours, learning which angles covered which areas and, more importantly, which areas had blind spots. He positioned himself strategically, using his security rounds as cover to observe their movements. The group went straight to the basement level, an area that housed old records and storage rooms. Marcus had been down there countless times during his years of service, but he had never seen legal teams conducting business in that section of the building. The basement was usually reserved for maintenance work and document storage, not high-level meetings. Through a small window in one of the storage room doors, Marcus caught glimpses of their activity. They had spread documents across several tables and were examining them under bright desk lamps they had brought with them. Sarah Chen was pointing at specific sections while the silver-haired man took notes. The man with glasses was photographing certain documents with what looked like a high-end camera. Marcus managed to position himself near an air vent that carried sound from the storage room. The acoustics weren't perfect, but he could make out fragments of their conversation. He heard mentions of original filing dates, witness statements that need revision, and most concerning of all, documents that should have been destroyed years ago. The silver-haired man's voice was particularly clear when he said, "If these records surface during the investigation, it could unravel everything we've built. The vice president's entire legal history could be called into question." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He was no legal expert, but he understood enough to know that what he was witnessing wasn't standard legal preparation. This looked like damage control, possibly document manipulation on a massive scale. After 2 hours, the group began packing up, but instead of taking all the documents with them, they left several boxes in the storage room. Marcus watched as Sarah Chen locked the room with a key she produced from her purse, a key that definitely wasn't standard courthouse issue. As they prepared to leave, Marcus heard the man with glasses say something that would haunt him for weeks. Phase 1 is complete. The problematic documents are now secured. We'll need to implement Phase 2 before the congressional hearing next month. Sarah Chen nodded grimly. The timeline is tight, but it's manageable. As long as no one else knows about these records, we can control the narrative completely. After they left, Marcus spent his lunch break trying to access the storage room where they had been working. The door was indeed locked, and his master security key, which opened most doors in the building, didn't work. Someone had changed. the lock, or installed a new one entirely. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He called his cousin David, who worked as a journalist for a mid-sized newspaper. They met for coffee after Marcus finished his shift. "David, I need to ask you something hypothetically," Marcus began, stirring sugar into his coffee nervously. "If someone witnessed what might be document tampering by high-level government officials, what should they do?" David leaned forward, instantly interested. "Hypothetically? They should document everything they can and contact law enforcement or the press. Why? Is this about something you've seen?" Marcus hesitated. He had always been a private person, someone who avoided drama and controversy. But the weight of what he had witnessed was becoming too heavy to carry alone. "I think I might have stumbled onto something big," Marcus finally said. "Something involving the vice president's legal team and documents that they seem very eager to keep hidden." David's eyes widened. "Marcus, you need to be very careful here. If what you're suggesting is true, you're talking about people with enormous power and resources. They won't take kindly to being exposed." "That's exactly why I'm scared to do anything," Marcus replied. "But I'm also scared of what happens if I don't do anything. What if these documents contain information the public deserves to know?" They talked for another hour, with David explaining the legal protections available to whistleblowers and the potential risks Marcus might face. By the end of their conversation, Marcus had made up his mind. He would continue documenting what he observed, but he would also start taking photographs and, if possible, gathering actual evidence. As he drove home that evening, Marcus realized his life had reached a turning point. He was no longer just a courthouse security guard going through his daily routine. He had become an accidental investigator, someone who had stumbled upon what might be one of the biggest political scandals in recent memory. The question that kept him awake that night was simple but terrifying. Was he brave enough to see this through to the end, knowing that powerful people would do almost anything to stop him? Marcus spent the weekend researching everything he could find about Vice President Kamala Harris's legal career. He had never paid much attention to politics before, but now he found himself diving deep into court records, news articles, and legal databases that were available to the public. What he discovered surprised him. There were several gaps in the public record, cases that were mentioned in news articles but seemed to have mysteriously incomplete documentation. Most notably, there were references to a major civil rights case from her time as California's Attorney General that appeared to have been sealed under unusual circumstances. On Monday morning, Marcus arrived at work with a new sense of purpose. He had purchased a small camera that looked like a pen and practiced using it over the weekend. If the legal team returned, he would be ready to gather real evidence. His patience was rewarded around noon when the black SUV pulled up again. This time, Sarah Chen was accompanied by a woman Marcus recognized from news coverage, Rebecca Martinez, who served as the vice president's chief legal counsel. The presence of such a high-ranking official confirmed that whatever was happening was extremely important. They were joined by the same two men from the previous week, plus a new face, a younger woman carrying what appeared to be scanning equipment. The group moved quickly through the courthouse, heading straight for the basement storage area. Marcus waited 15 minutes before making his move. Using his security rounds as cover, he made his way to the basement. The group had posted someone as a lookout. The younger woman with the scanning equipment was stationed near the stairwell entrance. Marcus had to find an alternative route. He remembered a maintenance corridor that connected to the basement from the building's old steam tunnel system. It was dusty and cramped, but it would allow him to get close to the storage room without being detected. Marcus squeezed through the narrow passage, his security radio turned down to its lowest volume. The corridor had several access panels that opened into different parts of the basement. Marcus carefully opened one that he calculated would be near the storage room where the group was working. Through the small opening, he could see their operation clearly. What he witnessed was shocking. They had set up a document processing station, with scanners, shredders, and what appeared to be equipment for altering paper documents. Rebecca Martinez was directing the operation while Sarah Chen sorted through boxes of files. "These are the witness statements from the Riverside case," Marcus heard Rebecca say, holding up a thick folder. "According to our timeline, these testimonies were never officially recorded, but here they are in the court's possession." Sarah Chen examined the documents. "The dates don't match what we reported to the Congressional Committee. If investigators find these, they'll know we provided incomplete information during the hearing." The silver-haired man was using scanning equipment to photograph certain pages. "I'm documenting everything before we make the necessary adjustments. We need to maintain plausible deniability." Marcus felt his heart pounding as he used his pen camera to record what he was seeing. The younger woman was actually using what looked like professional document alteration equipment, machines that could change dates, signatures, and other details on official papers. "The timeline is critical," Rebecca Martinez continued. "The congressional subpoena specifically requests all documents related to cases filed between 2018 and 2020. If we can adjust these filing dates to fall outside that range, they won't be subject to disclosure." "What about the digital records?" asked the man with thick glasses. "The court's computer system will still show the original dates." "That's been handled," Sarah Chen replied coldly. "Janet Morrison has administrative access to the digital archives. The electronic records will be updated to match our revised documentation." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. They were discussing systematic document fraud involving the federal court system. This wasn't just about protecting the vice president's reputation. This was about manipulating the legal system itself. The operation continued for nearly 3 hours. Marcus remained hidden in the maintenance corridor, documenting everything he could see and hear. He watched as they altered dozens of documents, changing dates, removing pages, and even replacing entire sections with newly created content. The most disturbing moment came when Rebecca Martinez held up a document that made everyone in the room freeze. "This is the original complaint from the Riverside civil rights case. It specifically names Kamala Harris as being personally aware of the constitutional violations. If this surfaces..." "It won't," Sarah Chen interrupted firmly. "This document was never supposed to exist in the first place. It should have been destroyed when the case was sealed." They fed the document into their shredder, along with several other papers that Marcus couldn't identify from his hiding spot. Each destroyed document represented evidence that might have been crucial to ongoing investigations or future legal proceedings. As the group prepared to leave, Marcus heard Rebecca Martinez give final instructions. "Phase 3 begins tomorrow. We'll need to coordinate with the Attorney General's office to ensure all parallel records are similarly updated. The congressional hearing is in 2 weeks, and everything needs to be perfect by then." After they left, Marcus remained hidden for another hour, making sure the coast was clear. When he finally emerged from the maintenance corridor, he was covered in dust and grime, but he had something invaluable: video evidence of high-level government officials engaged in systematic document fraud. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment staring at his camera's memory card. He had evidence that could bring down some of the most powerful people in government, but he also knew that possessing this evidence put him in serious danger. These weren't people who would simply accept exposure and resign quietly. They would fight back, and they had resources he couldn't imagine. He called his cousin David again, but this time he didn't speak in hypotheticals. "I need to see you tonight. I have something that's going to change everything, but I need help figuring out what to do next." As Marcus prepared to share his evidence with the outside world, he realized there was no going back. He was no longer just a witness to corruption. He was now the person who could expose it all. The question was whether he would survive long enough to tell his story. David stared at the small camera screen in disbelief as Marcus played back the footage he had captured. The video was grainy due to the poor lighting in the basement, but the audio was clear enough to understand every damning word spoken by the vice president's legal team. "Marcus, do you understand what you have here?" David whispered. rewinding the footage to watch Sarah Chen feed documents into the shredder again. This is evidence of federal crimes: document tampering, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to defraud the government. We're talking about charges that could send people to prison for decades. Marcus nodded grimly. That's why I'm scared. These aren't ordinary criminals we're dealing with. These are people who have the power to make problems disappear, and right now, I'm their biggest problem. David spent the next 2 hours reviewing all of Marcus's notes and footage. As a journalist, he had covered corruption cases before, but nothing of this magnitude. We need to be strategic about this. If we move too fast or approach the wrong people, they'll have time to destroy any remaining evidence and discredit you as a witness. What do you mean, discredit me? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Think about it, David replied. You're a security guard with a high school education going up against some of the most powerful lawyers in the country. They'll claim you misunderstood what you saw, that you're seeking attention, maybe even that you altered the footage yourself. They'll dig into your background looking for anything they can use against you. Marcus felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. So what do I do? Just pretend I never saw anything? No, David said firmly. We document everything properly and build a case that's impossible to dismiss. But we need help from people with more experience than either of us has. David had a contact at the FBI, Agent Maria Santos, who specialized in public corruption cases. They arranged to meet her the following evening at a small restaurant outside the city, away from any potential surveillance. Meanwhile, Marcus tried to maintain his normal routine at work, but everything felt different now. Every time he saw Deputy Administrator Janet Morrison, he wondered what she knew about the document alterations. When federal marshals visited the courthouse on routine business, he found himself studying their faces, wondering if they were there for him. On Tuesday, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. There was a new security camera installed in the basement hallway, right outside the storage room where he had witnessed the document tampering. Someone was clearly concerned about unauthorized access to that area. During his lunch break, Marcus tested his theory by walking past the new camera. Within minutes, his supervisor called him into the office. Marcus, I need to ask you about your movements yesterday, Supervisor Reynolds said, pulling out a logbook. According to the electronic records, you accessed the basement level 3 times during your shift, but you only logged 2 maintenance checks. Can you explain the discrepancy? Marcus felt his heart racing, but he kept his voice steady. I thought I heard a noise near the storage rooms during my second round, so I went back to check it out. Must have forgotten to log it. You know how it is. Sometimes we respond to sounds without thinking about paperwork. Reynolds studied him carefully. In the future, make sure all your movements are properly logged. There have been some security concerns raised about that area of the building. What kind of security concerns? Marcus asked, trying to sound casual. That's not something I can discuss with general security staff, Reynolds replied curtly. Just make sure you follow proper logging procedures. That evening, Marcus met with David and Agent Santos at the restaurant. Maria Santos was a serious woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to Marcus's story without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Mr. Williams, she said after reviewing his footage, what you've documented appears to show federal crimes being committed by high-ranking government officials. However, I need to be honest with you about what this means for your safety. What do you mean? Marcus asked, though he feared he already knew. Once we begin an official investigation, word will inevitably leak. These people have sources throughout the government, and they'll know we're coming for them. They may attempt to intimidate you, discredit you, or worse. David leaned forward. What kind of protection can you offer him? Agent Santos sighed. Limited. We can put him in witness protection temporarily, but that means leaving his job, his home, essentially his entire life. And there's no guarantee it would be permanent. If the case falls apart, or if higher-ups decide it's not worth pursuing, he'd be on his own. Marcus felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. And if I don't come forward, then some of the most powerful people in government continue to manipulate the legal system with impunity, Agent Santos replied. Other cases may be compromised, justice may be denied to victims, and the public trust in our institutions continues to erode. They talked for another hour, with Agent Santos explaining the legal processes that would unfold if Marcus decided to move forward. She would need to verify his evidence, conduct additional surveillance, and build a broader case that didn't rely solely on his testimony. I need time to think, Marcus finally said. This is the biggest decision of my life. Agent Santos handed him a secure phone. If you decide to proceed, call this number, but don't wait too long. Every day they have to destroy more evidence or solidify their cover-up makes our job harder. As they parted ways, David pulled Marcus aside. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But remember, sometimes ordinary people are the only ones who can stop extraordinary corruption. Driving home alone, Marcus thought about his simple life as a courthouse security guard. He had a small apartment, a steady job, and a quiet routine that he had always found comfortable. Tomorrow, he could continue that life, pretending he had never witnessed the document tampering operation, or he could make a phone call that would turn him into the key witness in what might become one of the biggest political scandals in American history. As he lay in bed that night, Marcus realized that his decision would define not just his own future, but potentially the future of government accountability in America. The question was whether a simple security guard had the courage to take on some of the most powerful people in the country. By morning, he would have his answer. Marcus woke up Wednesday morning with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. After lying awake most of the night, he had reached his decision. He couldn't live with himself knowing what he had witnessed while doing nothing about it. At 6:30 in the morning, he called the secure number Agent Santos had given him. "I'm ready to move forward," he told her simply. "Whatever it takes." "Good," Agent Santos replied. "But we need to act fast. My sources tell me there's unusual activity around the courthouse today. They might be accelerating their timeline." Marcus got ready for work as usual, but this time he carried additional equipment provided by Agent Santos, a more sophisticated recording device, and a small GPS tracker that would allow the FBI to monitor his location at all times. When he arrived at the courthouse, Marcus immediately noticed increased security presence. There were federal marshals stationed at entrances he had never seen them guard before, and Deputy Administrator Morrison was conducting an unusual morning inspection of the security office. "Williams," she called out as Marcus was reviewing his assignment sheet. "I need to speak with you privately." They walked to her office, where Morrison closed the door and activated a white noise machine, a device Marcus had never seen her use before. "There have been some concerns raised about security protocols in the basement storage areas," she began, watching his reaction carefully. "Specifically, there are questions about unauthorized personnel accessing restricted zones." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "I haven't noticed any unauthorized access during my rounds." "That's interesting," Morrison replied, "because our new monitoring systems show evidence of someone spending extended periods in the maintenance corridors near the storage rooms. Someone who knew the building well enough to avoid our standard security cameras." Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead, but he maintained his composure. "The maintenance corridors are part of my regular inspection route. Sometimes I have to spend extra time in there if I discover problems with the building systems." Morrison studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to be direct with you. There are very important legal proceedings happening in this building that require absolute confidentiality. If someone were to interfere with those proceedings, even accidentally, it could have serious consequences for national security." "I understand," Marcus replied, recognizing the threat beneath her words. "Good. I'm reassigning you to the main entrance for the rest of this week. No basement access, no maintenance corridor inspections. Is that clear? Marcus nodded, but internally, he was concerned. If they were restricting his access, it might mean they were planning another major document alteration session. During his lunch break, Marcus found a way to contact Agent Santos without using the secure phone. He called from a payphone outside the courthouse, knowing that his cell phone might be monitored. "They've restricted my access to the basement," he reported. "I think something big is happening today or tomorrow." "We know," Agent Santos replied. "We've had the building under surveillance since yesterday. A federal judge issued a warrant allowing us to monitor all electronic communications related to the courthouse basement storage area. What you started has now become a full FBI investigation. Are you going to arrest them?" "Not yet. We need to catch them in the act of destroying or altering documents. Your video evidence is powerful, but we need more to build a case that will stick against people with this level of legal representation." That afternoon, Marcus watched from his new post at the main entrance as the black SUV arrived again. This time, there were 2 vehicles and at least 8 people, including several faces Marcus didn't recognize. They moved through the courthouse with obvious urgency. What Marcus didn't know was that Agent Santos and her team were conducting extensive surveillance from multiple locations around the building. They had obtained warrants to monitor phone communications, and they had discovered that the document alteration operation was much larger than anyone had initially suspected. The investigation had revealed that similar operations were taking place in federal courthouses in 3 other states, all coordinated by the vice president's legal team. They weren't just covering up individual cases. They were systematically rewriting the legal record to hide a pattern of constitutional violations that spanned multiple years and jurisdictions. Around 4 in the afternoon, Marcus noticed something unusual. Federal agents in business suits were positioning themselves around the courthouse. Agent Santos had warned him that when they made their move, it would happen quickly. At 4:15, Marcus watched through the main entrance as federal agents flooded into the courthouse. They had search warrants and arrest warrants, and they moved with military precision toward the basement storage areas. The timing was perfect. The vice president's legal team was caught in the middle of what appeared to be their largest document destruction session yet. When the FBI agents burst into the storage room, they found industrial shredders running, computers actively altering, digital records and boxes of documents in various stages of being destroyed or modified. Marcus watched as Sarah Chen, Rebecca Martinez, and the other members of the team were led out of the courthouse in handcuffs. The silver-haired man was arguing loudly with federal agents, demanding to know who had authorized the investigation. Deputy Administrator Morrison was also arrested, her role in providing unauthorized access to federal records having been uncovered during the investigation. Agent Santos approached Marcus at his security post. "Mr. Williams, I need you to come with us. You're not under arrest, but we need your formal statement, and frankly, it's not safe for you to remain here." As Marcus left the courthouse that day, news vans were already arriving. Within hours, the story would be national headlines. Vice President's legal team arrested in federal document tampering scandal. But for Marcus, the most surreal part was walking past reporters and camera crews who had no idea that the security guard they were ignoring was the person whose courage had exposed the entire operation. That evening, in a secure FBI facility, Marcus gave his formal statement while watching news coverage of the arrests. Every major network was covering the story, with legal experts explaining the serious federal charges involved and political analysts discussing the potential impact on the vice president's career. "You did the right thing," Agent Santos told him as they concluded the interview. "What you witnessed and documented has exposed systematic corruption at the highest levels of government. There will be congressional hearings, criminal trials, and probably reforms to prevent this from happening again." Marcus nodded, but he was also thinking about the personal cost. His quiet life as a courthouse security guard was over. He would be a key witness in multiple federal trials, a public figure whether he wanted to be or not. As he prepared to enter witness protection temporarily, Marcus realized that sometimes ordinary people are called upon to do extraordinary things. He had answered that call, and in doing so, he had helped protect the integrity of the American legal system. 6 months later, Marcus Williams sat in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching the final day of congressional hearings on what the media had dubbed Document Gate. His testimony had been the cornerstone of the investigation that followed. The arrests at the federal courthouse. The scope of the corruption had proven even larger than initially suspected. The FBI investigation revealed that the document tampering operation had affected over 200 cases across multiple states, involving civil rights violations, environmental crimes, and financial fraud cases that had been systematically covered up or manipulated. Vice President Kamala Harris had resigned 3 months earlier, claiming she had no knowledge of her legal team's activities. However, evidence presented during the congressional hearings suggested otherwise. Emails and phone records recovered by the FBI showed a pattern of communication that implied high-level awareness of the document alteration operations. Sarah Chen and Rebecca Martinez had both been convicted of federal crimes and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 8 to 12 years. Deputy Administrator Morrison received a lighter sentence in exchange for her cooperation with investigators, revealing how the scheme had operated within the federal courthouse system. Marcus had testified before Congress twice, his quiet demeanor and detailed knowledge making him a compelling witness. Legal experts praised his courage, while political commentators debated the implications of his revelations for government accountability. But the experience had changed him profoundly. The simple life he had enjoyed as a courthouse security guard was gone forever. Death threats from political extremists had made witness protection necessary, and even now, months later, he lived under an assumed name with regular check-ins from federal marshals. His cousin David had written a book about the scandal, with Marcus's permission, titled The Guard Who Guarded Democracy. The book became a bestseller, and David donated half the proceeds to organizations supporting government whistleblowers. "You know," David said during one of his visits to Portland, "there are people calling you a hero. Universities want to give you honorary degrees, civil rights organizations want to honor you with awards." Marcus looked out the window of his temporary home. "I don't feel like a hero. I just feel like someone who saw something wrong and couldn't ignore it." "That's exactly what makes you a hero," David replied. "You had everything to lose and nothing to gain, but you did it anyway." The congressional hearings had resulted in sweeping reforms to federal record-keeping systems. New oversight mechanisms were implemented to prevent unauthorized access to court documents, and independent monitors were assigned to high-profile cases involving government officials. Marcus had been offered a position with the FBI's Publics Integrity Section, helping to train agents in recognizing document tampering and other forms of evidence manipulation. He was considering the offer, though it would mean permanently leaving his old life behind. On the final day of the hearings, Committee Chairman Senator Rodriguez made a statement that Marcus would never forget. "Mr. Williams represents the best of American civic duty. When faced with a choice between personal safety and public integrity, he chose integrity. His courage has helped restore faith in our legal institutions and reminded us that democracy depends on ordinary citizens being willing to do extraordinary things." The hearing concluded with new legislation requiring enhanced protections for federal whistleblowers and stricter penalties for document tampering by government officials. The vice president's former legal team would spend years in federal prison, and several judges who had been complicit in sealing cases inappropriately faced disciplinary action. As Marcus watched the final gavel fall on the congressional hearings, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. A year ago, he had been an anonymous security guard, content with his quiet routine and steady paycheck. Now he was a key figure in one of the most significant government accountability cases in recent history. His phone rang, Agent Santos calling with an update on his security status. "Good news," she said. "The major threats against you have been neutralized. The people making them have been arrested, and our assessment is that you can probably return to a more normal life soon." "What does more normal mean?" Marcus asked. "Well, you'll never be completely anonymous again. This case will follow you for the rest of your life, but you won't need federal protection anymore, and you can choose where you want to live and work." Marcus thanked her and hung up, then walked to his small balcony overlooking the Portland skyline. The city was beautiful in the evening light, but he found himself missing the familiar halls of the federal courthouse, where his old life had been so dramatically transformed. 3 weeks later, Marcus made his decision about the FBI offer. He accepted the position, not because he wanted fame or recognition, but because he realized he had found his true calling. His experience had shown him that protecting democracy required constant vigilance from people willing to speak up when they witnessed wrongdoing. On his first day at the FBI training facility in Quantico, Marcus met other whistleblowers who had exposed corruption in various government agencies. Their stories were different, but they all shared something in common: the courage to risk everything for the principle that truth matters more than personal comfort. "The hardest part," explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a former CDC scientist who had exposed data manipulation during a public health crisis, "isn't the initial decision to come forward. It's living with the consequences afterward, knowing that you can never go back to the way things were." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. But as he began his new career training federal agents to recognize and investigate government corruption, he realized that while he couldn't go back to his old life, he wouldn't want to even if he could. The investigation he had sparked continued to have ripple effects throughout the government. Several other high-ranking officials had been forced to resign when their connections to the document tampering scheme were revealed. Reform legislation was being implemented in courts across the country, and a new culture of transparency was slowly taking hold in federal agencies. A year after the congressional hearings concluded, Marcus received a letter that surprised him. It was from a young law student at Georgetown University who had written her thesis on government accountability, inspired by his case. "Mr. Williams," the letter read, "your actions have inspired a new generation of lawyers and public servants who are committed to protecting the integrity of our legal system. I wanted you to know that because of your courage, many of us are entering public service with a renewed commitment to transparency and justice." Marcus kept that letter in his desk drawer, reading it whenever he questioned whether the disruption to his life had been worth it. 2 years after the document tampering scandal broke, Marcus was asked to speak at his old high school's graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking out at young faces full of hope and possibility, he chose his words carefully. "Success in life isn't measured by how much money you make or how famous you become," he told the graduates. "Real success is measured by whether you have the courage to do the right thing when it matters most, even when doing the right thing costs you everything you thought you wanted." He paused, thinking about that rainy Tuesday morning when he first noticed something unusual about the vice president's legal team. Sometimes life puts you in a position where you have to choose between staying safe and staying honest. I hope you never face that choice. But if you do, I hope you'll remember that democracy depends on ordinary people being willing to do extraordinary things when extraordinary things need to be done. After the ceremony, a young graduate approached him. "Mr. Williams, I've been accepted to both law school and the FBI Academy. Your story helped me decide which path to choose." "Which did you choose?" Marcus asked. "Law school," she replied. "I want to be the kind of lawyer who protects the system instead of manipulating it." Marcus smiled, realizing that his actions had created ripples he was only beginning to understand. The document tampering scandal had not only brought criminals to justice and reformed government procedures, it had inspired a new generation of public servants committed to integrity and transparency. As he drove home that evening, Marcus reflected, on the journey that had transformed him from an anonymous security guard into a symbol of civic courage. The path had been difficult, and the cost had been high, but he had no regrets. He had learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not by soldiers or politicians, but by ordinary people who refuse to look the away when they witness injustice. Marcus Williams had been such a person, and in standing up for truth when it mattered most, he had helped preserve the foundations of American democracy for future generations. The guard who had once simply watched over a building had ultimately helped guard the integrity of the entire legal system. It was a responsibility he had never asked for, but one he had carried with honor when history called upon him to act.